So the coordinate plane, that's a general shape for a plane. I need 2 dimensions, right? It's a flat surface that extends forever in both directions, all right? And the 2 dimensions, what are the general variables that we use for those dimensions? You guys are really familiar with them. X and Y. All right, show me with your hands, which way does the x-axis go when we do it? Yep, and the y-axis, up and down. All right, good. All right, so coordinates are ordered pairs. All right, an ordered pair, 2 numbers, x and y. So if I had a point 1, 2, is that the same point as 2, 1? No, the ordered part means that it matters what order they come in. All right. Nod your head if you've seen these before. X and Y, yes you have. Good, all right. So I have the x-axis. Sometimes it's called the independent axis. The one that goes up and down. The vertical one is my y-axis. It's also called the dependent axis. And then I have a special point called the origin. Can somebody raise their hand and tell me what the coordinates of the origin are? Yeah, Jules. 0, 0. It's always our starting point, okay? So we start at the origin, and we move off of that. All right, 0, 0. That one up here, this section of the graph in the upper right is called quadrant 1. Now I have 2 options. I can go counterclockwise or I can go clockwise. Can somebody remember and tell me which is quadrant 2? Is it to the left or is it down? Yeah, sure.
Left.
To the left. All right. So I go left, and I get quadrant 2. Speed that up a little. I go down and get quadrant 3. I go over here and I get quadrant 4. Now, if I had a positive and a positive in my ordered pairs, show me on your fingers what quadrant I'm in. Positive, positive. If I had positive, negative, where are we? Positive, negative. We're in the 4th. Negative, negative. 3. Good. All right. So over here, positive, positive. Over there, negative, positive. Negative, negative, positive, negative. If you don't remember, that's fine. I was just teaching this with pre-calculus people for trigonometry, and a lot of them couldn't remember either. So it's just something we got to remind ourselves of. All right. So that's our general setup of the coordinate plane. And we plot points. That's the point 4, negative 3, because I go back 4 and I go down 3. Okay? So that's our starting point. From that, we're going to take points, we're going to find distances, we're going to find midpoints. But if we're not plotting them correctly, then we can't do it. All right. Distance. We're going to look at the distance formula. We're going to try to figure out where it comes from. So, if I have 0, 0, and 7, 0, and looking at that, can somebody raise their hand and tell me what is the point, or what's my distance there, and how did you know? I'm not trying to trick you. What's the distance between those 2 points? Yeah, Devin. It's 7. How'd you know it's 7?
Because 7, 0, and the beginning point was 0, 0.
Yeah, I go from 0 to 7 is a distance of 7 units. Do we know if those are feet or miles or inches? No, we just know units. Okay, so that's easy. What makes it more difficult is, let's say I had this point and the origin. So I want to know this distance. Well, what makes that harder than the one that we just looked at before? Yeah, Jules.
They don't have any common X or Y, so you can't just count.
You can't just count, right? It's not along the axis. So somehow I've got these diagonals that I've got to deal with. Well, what's a shape that we are familiar with that we have some information about, if we could build it? Triangle. What type of triangle? Right triangle. What's great about the coordinate system is it makes right triangles very easily. So I want you to figure out what's the distance. What's D? If I have that triangle, think Pythagoras. What's the distance going to be? Take 30 seconds to figure it out, and then we'll talk. So we get 10. And if we want to just really show it, we show the Pythagorean theorem, and we get square root of 100, which is 10. All right. Now do it if you're still with me. Yeah? Easy so far? Okay, I'm going to make it harder. What if these were my points? And not only, so do we agree that this is going to have the same distance as 10? Yeah, these are congruent. I picked it up and I moved it over. Now, what happens though if I don't have the lengths, but I have instead the coordinates? So now I'm going to be given 2 points. It's not at the origin. I somehow need to figure out how I'm going to get the distance here. Sean, what do you think?
You figure out what the right angle corner is, and what coordinate it is,
Okay.
and then you use. I didn't think that right.
Okay.
I know like how to get the measurements, but I'm not sure like which number to use or whatever.
It's a good start. I like it. Did you have a hand up? No?
And,
Okay. Well, we know this bottom piece has got to be 6. And we know the top, the one going up and down, has got to be 8. Well, if I look at what the coordinates tell me, if I take negative 11 out this far and I subtract negative 5, which is that piece, I'm going to be left with 6. And if I do the same thing going up and down, I get negative 8. So I'm just subtracting the coordinates, the y value and the y value, the x value and the x value. That's how we found the distance before. You guys just subtract the coordinates. It just looked easier from the way I had it listed. All right? Well, if I use my Pythagorean theorem again, and write it like that, I get the distance of 10. And let's keep in mind, if I square negative 6, is that going to be a positive or a negative number? What's that? You can't, you're right, you cannot square root a negative. Excellent. But if I took a negative, negative 6 squared, is that going to give me positive 36 or negative 36? Positive, because a negative times a negative is a positive, right? All right. Okay. So now let's make it scary. All right, we're going to do the exact same thing, except for I have one general point, and I have another general point. And the way I know it's general is I'm saying this is x sub 1, this is the first x value, this is y sub 1, this is the first y value. This is x sub 2, y sub 2. All right, so if you haven't written anything down, I want you to write this down. I want to know the distance. So I'm going to build my triangle. Anybody want to guess as to what the horizontal is going to look like? It's going to be an expression. It's not going to be a number. It's going to be an expression. Devin, what do you think?
x2 minus x1.
Good. We can do x2 minus x1. That's that distance. And what about this one? Do you know?
y2
y2 minus
minus
y1. So we get y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. And then the Pythagorean theorem tells us this. This squared plus this squared. And then if I want d by itself, I take the square root. So that big nightmare of an equation is called the distance formula. So I told you, we're going to take something easy and make it look hard. Okay. So I subtract the x coordinates and square it. I subtract the y coordinates and square it. I add them together. I take the square root of the whole thing. And that gives me a distance. Okay. I want you guys to try one. I want you to find the distance between 3/8 and 6/5. Okay? I'm going to give you a couple minutes to work on that. If you're stuck, talk to me, talk with those around you, and we will figure it out.
I think too complicated to actually like be worth it. But could you make it that into the diagonal of a triangle, and
Okay.
then measure it through that, and then find the midpoint of what you find?
Okay.
CV?
Let's try that. I like that. So if we were to make a triangle, right? Triangles are our friend. We know lots about them. And I know this side is 7, and I know this is 5. So I know the midpoint's going to be halfway between those two. Right? So I go back and I figure out, well, that's going to be 2.5 and 3.5. I add those to my points. So I go back 3.5, and I go down 2.5. I get the midpoint. So you can always build a triangle. Or we can use this thing called the midpoint formula, which is the same idea. So again, I start with a general set of ordinates. x1, y1, x2, y2. And I want to know the midpoint. All it turns out to be is the average. You add up the x points and divide by 2. You add up the y points and divide by 2. So it's easier. It's our average value. I want you to try one. 2 points. Tell me what the midpoint is. Take a minute or two, talk with each other, and we'll talk in a second.